I sculpt energy. The creative process can be quite a ride. The finished pieces are elegant, but the process itself is far from elegant. As an inspiration, I don't directly go out into the world looking for energy, I go inwards. I want it to come from somewhere much more sort of nebulous and unknown. I don't want to carry on the known, which is what you're doing if you're watching other people, really. Clay, to me, is quite inert and dead naturally, and so if you wedge it up and then you throw it on the wheel, it's like it brings some life into it. It wakes it up, and it looks really quite different to if you just flatten it out. I do try and listen to the clay. If I'm in the right headspace, and you have to be in the right headspace, clear and listening, not thinking and planning. And if I am, sometimes I feel like I can get an idea from the clay itself rather than I want, this shape. That's more fun. It's much more fun to try and work with the material itself. But I also, underneath, have my own little plan that I hope will go my way. But it's actually a lot more fun and more interesting for me if I go in a direction that I probably wasn't thinking and then it does work out. I think I probably came up with the idea almost by mistake, to be honest. When I look around, I see examples of kind of success through accidents, and I think that happens definitely in my work, and I love it. I love that that's possible. So pull the clay right out to the edge and pull it up, and you can see the finger marks in it. And then at exactly the right time I cut it with twisted wire and position it in a way that I want it to sit. And the clay has a role in that, because sometimes it flatly refuses to do what I want it to do, and if you overwork it, then it gets really tired. So you've only got a couple of chances to position it the way you want it, with support. And again, it's all about movement, and I get furious with the clay sometimes because it won't do what I want it to do, but then it turns out that it was right. It was better off going that way. So if they're too wet, they collapse, and if they're too dry, they crack. So you have to read the weather as well as the clay. And it's very, very different winter to summer. Sun and wind is just perfect. But it's quite nice that you have to work with the weather. I have probably 50 or maybe 60% control. I've opened the kiln up in the past, and the pieces have been all in there nicely set up with their own individual props and everything. And one piece has decided, I'm not having this, and it has moved, quite dramatically in the firing, pushed a piece beside it aside, and you just think, wow, it's impressive. They're not high fired, they're only fired to 1100 degrees, because beyond 1100 degrees the clay's just like, I can't do this in that form. So that's why I use terra sigillata. And then the colour, the only colour I use really is to accentuate the form. Colour hitting the piece like the sun might from a certain angle, and just highlighting the form a bit more. So it gives it a little bit more depth. And I don't want it to be about colour, I want it to be about form. I do spend quite a lot of time considering the right name for them. For example, Torn Free was one where I was working with tearing the clay, thinking or hoping that I might inspire even more freedom in the movement by actually having tethered ends on it. It's actually quite hard to make it look free rather than try hard. But the names have to honour the piece. For example, Sancta is about a place that you might go to that feels safe for you, and that could be anywhere. For me, it's probably more inwards than a location. I live on a beautiful small island that's surrounded by bush, and my location is quite isolated, some might say. And the biggest treat of that is the stingray, because they come along quite regularly. Just amazing. And their whole movement is incredibly graceful and seamless. To dive into the sea and move in water, you're sensing energy. To walk through the bush, you're feeling it. I'm really interested in the energy and the movement that we don't see. It goes through us, it goes through everything. I obsessively stick with soft curves so that your eye will keep moving around them. All they are to me is little moments of freedom in terms of energy, and hopefully your eye would look at a shape like that and carry on, it wouldn't stop. Freedom from constraint, freedom from rules, freedom from control, freedom from doing what you're supposed to do. It's totally about liberation to me, really. Just an ongoingness rather than a beginning and an end. The Buddhists do have a belief system where energy is a continuum. It keeps moving, it keeps passing through everything. It sort of goes along with their no beginning, no end. I do feel very freed by that idea, so that's probably why I keep working with it. When I was only working in ceramics, I was acutely aware of people seeing the medium, not the work, but the medium as a craft, not art. Artists all come from such a different place, and some are intimidatingly sort of cerebral about the way they approach their work and really interesting, but it is about understanding and design and control. So I quite like the fact that I definitely don't have full control. And I love the idea that you're filtering something, somehow, who cares how. I genuinely think if you put yourself in the right space and clear your head out of the way, you can, filter through sensations and movements. Just seems like it's a huge privilege, really, isn't it, to think, I'm just going to see what comes and go with it. Well, in some ways I have more control with the steel, but in other ways I really don't either. It's quite a visual feedback thing. I can see what the steel's doing on one side of the machine and what it's doing on the other side of the machine, and therefore I can respond to that. But it's quite hard for me to think, I'm going to make a form in this shape on the steel press. It's not that controlled at all. So I've still got that lack of control, which I like. Colours with pieces like No Holds Barred is a decent orange. So it's very strong in amongst prolific greens or browns. That's a lovely matte orange, I like that, and slightly textured as well. They're powder coat painted. So the steel pieces are made to weather all the elements. Initially with the steel pieces it was Corten steel, because I like Corten steel and I love the fact that it seals itself. And that's really the whole point of it. And then I was being asked to paint them or seal them, and I did try, but it wasn't very successful. So I started using mild steel, and that then needed to be galvanised and powder coat painted. The pieces can be elegant. I mean, I actually genuinely think that my work is a lot about what I'm not. You know, I'm not any of the things that my work is. Make what you can't be.